Okay. So, hello again. Welcome to the first event of the Liberated Tuesdays, also known as Liberated Salı. So, we are starting big and famous. Our guests today are well-known facilitators of liberating structures and also the professional Scrum trainers. So, in the later section of the talk, if you'd like to ask about questions related with Scrum or with liberating structures, you're in the right place. So, welcome again. We are recording the session, and let me introduce our guests, Barry and Christian. Sorry, guys, hard to tell the Dutch names. I can tell the Overeem, but Christian, I'm not good at your surname. Can you spell it, please? Okay. Anyways, so we would like to be talking about the book that you are writing. When we met in person, we were talking about the Zombie Scrum Survival Guidebook. And during that time, we would like to get some burning questions from the community. So for the burning questions, let me share this for a second. We are going to be getting the questions at slido.com, and the number of the event is LS number 1, LS no 1. So if you'd like to ask any questions to the Barry and Christian, to the Liberators, please, you can just direct your questions to here. After we are talking about the book, we can just pass into the burning questions. Will that be okay? Any questions? Or shall we go? No questions. We are just moving. Okay, so the Liberators, can you tell us about the book? What are you going to write about?
You want to kick it off, Barry?
Yeah, no, you kick it off, that's fine.
No, you kick it off.
Yeah, so the book about Zombie Scrum. So I think Christian and I already for a couple of years are hosting workshops about Zombie Scrum. And just to emphasize, that has always been something that we've done with our friend Johannes Schartau from Germany. He works at Holisticon, and writing the book is something that we do with the three of us. So Johannes Schartau, Christian, and myself. And what we've noticed is when we started organizing these Zombie Scrum workshops a couple of years ago, maybe in a painful way, they were quite popular. So a lot of people recognized the way we explained Zombie Scrum, and that's something that we can dive a bit deeper into in a moment. But over the years, we noticed that a lot of organizations recognize it and also struggle with doing something about it. So in a way, it was kind of painful that they recognize it, but it was even more painful that they did not really know what to do. So how to resolve Zombie Scrum or how to prevent it. So while doing a lot of these workshops, we also gained experience in things that worked well and did not really work well in organizations. And then I think it was Christian, or it was actually Johannes, at least it was not me. Someone came up with the idea with like, why don't we just bundle it and wrap it up in a book? And that's how we just started. And in a way, COVID-19 is of course horrible what's happening, but in a way it did offer us the opportunity. It was like a great way to empty our agenda and create a lot of space for actually writing the book. So that might be one of the only advantages of this past period, is that we spent a lot of time writing the book. And actually we are almost done with the manuscript. It's ready for review for a small amount of people that we selected from the community, and they are currently reviewing it. Of course, I expect some feedback, and once we've processed it, then the manuscript is done. And maybe Christian, you can tell a bit more, like done doesn't really mean done. That it's published next week.
I heard you say almost done, Barry. Yeah, no, well, that's actually an interesting story, because publishing a book, as you can imagine, is a very waterfall process, or at least most publishers want to do it in a very waterfall way. But we actually worked with our publisher Pearson to do it in a more waterfall, in a less waterfall approach, more Scrum-like. So what we did is we wrote different parts, and those parts went through the whole cycle of review, getting feedback, doing the illustrations, and that was the first time they ever did that. So I'm quite proud that we got that through. It wasn't easy. They were not really a big fan of that approach, but they like it now. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So what else? Chris, do you have anything else to tell about the book, the Zombie Scrum book?
Yeah, I just want to add to your story about where this idea started, because I think for Barry and me, and also for Johannes, we have I think in our past, in our experiences with Scrum, we've seen a lot of good examples where it works, where the Scrum teams were doing good work, where the stakeholders were happy, where I or Barry or Johannes were part of a team that was really doing a good job and liking how they worked. And a lot of the organizations that we visit, people don't feel the same way. It's not working there. It's stiff. It's rigid. It doesn't feel fresh or energetic to do Scrum there. And at some point, we just started calling that zombie Scrum. And over time, we started collecting more of the symptoms that are part of that, but also some of the things you can do about it. And if there's anything we're trying to do in the book, it's that, to capture the symptoms, the causes, but also what can you actually do about it? Because, well, we don't like Scrum because it's Scrum, but just because it's pretty awesome in what it makes possible.
Yeah. We wanted to prevent it to only be a book with some nice theory and some cool principles that probably no one will disagree with. And we wanted to not only offer a bit of theory from our perspective, but mostly emphasize the practical way of really fighting zombie Scrum. And that's the balance that we hopefully, and I'm confident that we've managed to do so, have tried to put in the book.
I'm excited about it though. Like I was able to participate in 2 of the sessions that you were just making about the zombie Scrum. It was lovely. It was just brain exploding, that kind of stuff that, you know, but it will be very nice to see in the book too.
Yeah, and actually it's not really a huge surprise what we are going to write about, because that was also quite shocking for Pearson as well, because we said, okay, what we want to do is gather feedback about the book in the meantime, and also really publish it. So I just shared a link in the chat window with our Medium page, and we wrote quite a lot of articles about Zombie Scrum with content that is actually going to be part of the book, but by already publishing some of the articles. And sometimes these were chapters that we were not really sure about. So this was a way for us to really involve community, validate if the ideas that we were having made any sense. And based on the feedback, we could make some changes. So eventually, Pearson, the publisher, was like, okay, this is quite cool, because it prevents on that you are going to publish a book and already after a couple of weeks you discover that you need a new edition for the book.
So Barry, nice. May I ask you a question? So what makes this book different from other books about Scrum that are out there? Because there are a lot of books about Scrum and a lot of good ones. So what makes this one different?
Well, from my perspective, what I like about us, and it sounds a bit strange, is that we do not take ourselves too seriously. And sometimes people can talk about Scrum in such a serious way. And then I'm like, okay, it doesn't really have to be happy, clappy Scrum, but in a way you can just enjoy using Scrum. So we try to add some fun stuff as well. And that's also a way. Thea Schukke is our visual illustrator, and I think we have around 50 illustrations in the book, handmade by Thea Schukke, and these are all quite, in a way they are fun to see, but also in a sort of like, they can be a slap in the face moment as well. Once you stop laughing about the illustration, you're like, ah, crap, I recognize it. So in a way, I would say the illustrations, the fun way, and it's a very practical book. It's really something that encourages you to just start doing these experiments right away. And maybe also the order. What we've done is, like, chapter 3 of the book is going to be a first aid kit. And that's going to be somewhere in the beginning pages. And once you are really struggling with Zombie Scrum, we encourage you to only read that chapter. It's a 2-page chapter. And then just already start fighting Zombie Scrum in your organization. And once things settle down in your organization, then you can read the other parts of the book. So, Chris, so you can expect a question back as well.
Go ahead.
So, do you have a different opinion, Chris? Do you have something to add, or?
No, I think you did a great job. This is a good answer. It's a book we're trying to balance the theory with the practical side, and I think you conveyed that really well. So
Cool.
It's good to have illustrations too. People just get bored of the wordings when it's too much. It's good to see the pictures, especially the funny ones.
And maybe Chris, because now we're emphasizing on the book, which is excellent, but actually what we are doing, Johannes, Chris and I, is creating an ecosystem. Can you maybe, Chris, emphasize or explain what this Zombie Scrum ecosystem is about, and maybe also the Zombie Scrum survey?
Yeah, there are also already some questions coming in, by the way, in the poll, but I'll share a link in the chat window. It's a website that we created for Zombie Scrum, not necessarily for the book, but just as part of the book, where Scrum teams around the world can diagnose how they're doing with Scrum. And it's a pretty big survey. I think it has about 100 questions, but to date, over 2,000 teams have actually participated. And that's pretty cool because it allows you to see how your team is doing on a number of topics, but also how other teams are doing, like not individual other teams, but like all teams as a whole. What are they doing with Scrum? And when you complete the survey with your team, you also get feedback. So the survey also suggests things to try, experiments to try. And we're building up this database with more and more data. I'm actually, today I've spent most of the day analyzing it. But the idea that we have is to start adding more experiments that help and then actually validating with the data that we're gathering to see if it actually helps. Because a lot of the things that people are saying on the internet and in books and in blog posts, that includes us, is not always validated with data. So what we're trying to do is also create an ecosystem where we can collect data to be better able to help Scrum teams find what works for them. So that's one area, the survey. But what we're going to do when the book publishes, I think it's somewhere start of next year, we'll also make available a database with all sorts of recipes and practices that you can use to start working towards better Scrum and start recovering from zombie Scrum. A bit similar to what we're doing in the book. So the recipes are all simple. They all assume that you're in an environment where you can't actually change all that much. So you have to make small changes. So each recipe basically is a small change that you can make. Some of them may work very well for you, others may not, but that's why we're also expanding it with a larger database. I think the book will contain over 50 recipes, something like that, but we'll add more to our online database. So you can also use that.
So I think that's also a unique characteristic of the book, is that we really use a data-driven approach. So not only based on our assumptions, but really on what the community itself, the 2,000 themes itself, made visible on what's going on in their organization. And based on that, we offer experiments and our ideas.
Looks like a great tool. It's free and anonymous, and we can see our status. Lovely. I like that.
Yeah. It's free and we don't track anything. It's like there are no trackers in there. It's just like we want to keep it simple. We're not going to ask money for the survey either. It's just to help people. And for us, it's nice because we can gather some data about teams. It's all anonymized, of course, but it helps us to actually say something meaningful about what's happening there.
Yeah, and it's also kind of cool, at least I think it's cool, that your team is going to be compared to all the other teams that, on the average of all the other teams that filled in the survey. So
I just realized. I just realized that you're getting the location data. Will you be just showing any data about the countries, about the Scrum maturity of them, or something like this? Any ideas?
What we ask people to do when they fill in the survey, if they want to, they can fill in the rough location, like that could be the area or the country that you live in. And based on that, we automatically get sort of the rough coordinates, but it's not like your GPS location. It's just like, this is sort of the area on the planet where I am. And based on that, we can generate a map to see how Scrum is working in countries all over the world, in areas all over the world. For example, in Australia, there are hardly any Scrum teams. That's very interesting. And the people that we know in Australia actually recognize that. Scrum is not a big thing there. So that's interesting to see.
Can I ask a question? Hi guys, by the way.
Hey,
Ahmet. Hi. The price of the book, is there any idea about the price of the book?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. That's up to the publisher. So anything I'm going to say is going to be off, but I think it's going to be
Around
30 or 40 euros. I think that's what they mentioned in
cool,
the initial publications.
Good.
My guess is 30 euros. Something like that.
If we consider the survey, then it's really cheap price.
Mm.
If we can see the results, it's really valuable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the survey will always be free. We won't ask money for that at all. It's just
perfect. Thanks.
I see actually quite a big number. 1,790 teams have participated already, and I'm curious about. I think these are the status, right? The ship has the current status of the participants. I think there's a summary. So I really wonder which locations maybe. Do you have a number for that? I mean, you said in Australia there are no Scrum teams, I guess, but mostly like 1,800 participants teams. Where are they from? America or?
I don't have I was analyzing it today, but not the location, so I have to get back on that. But what I do know, the last time I did it, and that was with 1,500, is that it was mostly United States, Western Europe. We had some in China, not that many, but there were some in China, and Russia also quite a lot. But I since then, a lot more teams have been added to the database, so I have to recheck where they are. But it's quite distributed already, actually.
Well, great.
Nice.
Great.
So Chris, actually, I'm looking at it right now. If I look at the infection tracker, then quite a lot of teams are achieving valuable outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting thing that I already found, that like regardless of how good the teams are doing based on all the questions, when you ask someone how much value is your team generating, they're in the highest scores possible for every team. That's a very interesting thing. So I don't know why that's happening, but one of the reasons could be that people always overestimate their own contribution, which is a known psychological phenomenon anyways. And I think that's happening for teams as well, but I have to dig deeper into that. But that's interesting, Barry. Yeah.
We should just always do the follow-up question that Johanna suggested. Like after each question, we're going to ask, really? And they need to reconsider the answer. Cool.
So what is a good time to start looking at some of the questions that are coming in the app? Because there are quite some already.
Yeah, we can just switch to that. Before switching to that, I would like to tell about the Liberated Salute just a bit. So these events are going to be the weekly events that we as team, like Emin, Ayşegül, Barış, and me, you can say hi, please guys, just show yourselves in this screen. And we are just going to organize weekly events about liberating structures, some days with Scrum, some days, maybe most days without Scrum, definitely. And in the end, what we aim to do is to just keep up the liberating structures community a little bit warm in here, maybe forge a community, and then maybe we can just go to the immersion workshops, and so we can just think about it later. But right now, I can say that easily, like every week, we are just going to organize some workshops about liberating structures. So, Barış, Ayşegül, Emin, where are you?
Hi.
Here we are.
Hi. We are here, Umut. This is the team that doing the organization. So you'll see them if you'd like to come next week. Let me present the questions, what's going on about the Slido. So just a second. Here we go. So there's no questions with any votes. So the top one, the latest one will be the first one. If you like to vote, it's a good time to vote, people. How is your experience so far with remote facilitation? Is it all about fostering ideas? So what challenges are you facing with debating structures while doing it with remote? What do you think?
Barry, you want to kick that off, or shall I do
Yeah, I can give it a try. Well, honestly, and I'm going to speak for myself, I'm not yet a huge fan of remote facilitation. That's not because I do not believe that it cannot work, but it's more like I just I've learned that I enjoy in-person workshops tremendously. And I really hope, and that's sort of like what I'm never going to do is only remote facilitation, or there should be no other choice, of course. What I did learn, however, is that you can get quite close to the in-person experience, and that quite a lot of liberating structures actually work quite well if you do it virtually. But it does require you to use tools like Zoom or Mural or Miro, something like that. But we've facilitated quite a lot of virtual meetups, and the feedback afterwards was always extremely positive. What was some different is that when you do an in-person workshop, you can just walk around and listen to the conversations, and then you have already sort of have a feeling like I think they're enjoying it, etc. With the virtual workshops, sometimes Chris and I were like clueless. We were like, yeah, okay, I don't know. We don't hear anyone complaining, and no one seems to be leaving the meetup, so probably they're enjoying it. And then afterwards, we get the feedback, and everyone was really excited about it. So something that we are doing differently right now is that when we are facilitating meetups, and Chris and I are always facilitating it together with two persons, one of us is joining the breakout rooms to just listen in and to just see like, okay, I'm just going to be a virtual fly on the wall. I'm just going to, I don't know, feel some of the energy and the conversations and the interactions that they are having with each other. And by doing that, I started to enjoy virtual facilitation a lot more. And Chris, can you build on that as well?
Yeah, I'm sharing a link to a blog post that we wrote with 10 tips that we learned for having effective virtual meetings and workshops, because I think it's helpful. But I agree with Barry's experience. I also prefer the in-person meetings. I think everyone or most people do. But it's actually quite doable if you have the right tools. It does require quite a lot of preparation, though. And the good thing, I think, is that we learned very early on is that liberating structures just work really well if you do them virtually. I wanted to say even better than in real life. That's not entirely true, but especially in virtual collaborations, using liberating structures is so useful because you want to break out this large group of people. I mean, right now I think we have 30 people in this channel. If you want to actually have conversations, you want to create breakout rooms and let people talk about things and then come back to the main channel, share their insights. So that's really useful. Yeah, we learn a lot from doing that.
Yeah, and also as was mentioned in the introduction, Chris and I are Scrum.org trainers, and we are responsible for the Professional Scrum Master 2 class. On request of Scrum.org, we created a virtual version of the PSM2 class. Some other Scrum trainers have already provided that class and also provided other virtual Scrum.org class. And overall, the feedback that Scrum.org and the trainers receive from the participants is really positive. In a way, it's a different experience, but still a very good learning experience. But that's something that we are gonna figure out in June. Then Chris and I have scheduled our first virtual PSM2 class. The only thing that we are gonna do different, and that's also a recommendation that we have for all virtual meetups, is keep it short. And we prefer meetups of 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and the PSM2 class is 2 days. But we are gonna create parts of 3 hours of chunks of 3 hours separated over 4 days. Because after 3 hours sitting behind or in front of a laptop, although you can do breaks, I'm sort of like, then my brain is just fried and I just need a longer break and then continue the next day.
While we were at immersion in Amsterdam, 2 days was a bit tiring.
Oh, it is.
2 full days, like tiring. I mean, like in physical, cause go there, walk there, run there, just stand up here and do that, do this, things like that. You know, while you're just in front of the screen, yes, it doesn't get too much tiring. But after 3 or 4 hours, yes, it makes you a little bit out of focus. So maybe like half day workshops is Good idea. I believe so. Let me pass to the another question. Will that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
If you could say only one thing to cure the zombie scrum, what is your antidote? What would it be?
So now we have to give the silver bullet answer, right? Like,
And the book, and the book.
well, there you do this, and then it's over. No, well, the one thing to cure zombie scrum is to release done increments every sprint. That's like it's the easy answer, but also the very hard thing to do. But still, that is the focus. If you have done increments, then zombie scrum will go away, even if it takes a while of releasing done increments to actually start seeing change. But that's been for me the experience, and I think it's the same for Barry and for a lot of the Scrum Masters we work with too. You really want to start creating done increments, and if that's not possible yet, at least deploy it to production or something that's as close as possible at the end of a sprint. Because if you start pushing work into the next sprint and you don't really deliver anything, everything in the Scrum framework falls apart. Why should you do a sprint review if there's nothing to review? Why should you do a sprint retrospective if the work isn't done? Why should you do a daily Scrum if there is nothing really to talk about because everyone's working on their own things? So that's, for me, the core. And it's not an easy answer, I know, but well, in the book we give more recipes on how to make this happen. But done increment, that's really the one thing. Barry, what's your thinking?
Yeah, I think that I don't wanna imitate Simon Sinek with his whole why part, but in a way it makes sense. For me, another answer is, and I fully agree with what Christian said, but another answer would be just validate with your team and your organization why you are even doing Scrum. That's something that I emphasize as well in the workshop that I provided at Agile Turkey, but a lot of organizations and teams that we work with are pretty clueless about how they even ended up using Scrum. It's just like someone in the ivory tower in your organization thought it was a brilliant idea to do Scrum because everyone else is doing it, or you hired a coach and the coach suggested doing Scrum, or someone just Googled it and were like, ooh, it was the top rate in Google, so then it should make sense, let's do Scrum. So we would also always get back to the purpose and the main reason in clarifying, like, so what are you trying to achieve with using Scrum? And maybe, just maybe, it could be that Scrum is not your ideal way of working and you should give XP or Kanban or something else a try. Could be as well. And that's in a way kind of cool about liberating structures as well, because liberating structures does give you the opportunity to have a good conversation about that. Give 9 whys a try, and 9 whys will help you clarify the purpose.
Yeah, I think that in the recipes that we have in the book, like the 50 recipes, I think maybe over 30 of them use liberating structures in some form or another, which kind of shows that liberating structures in themselves can also help prevent zombie Scrum. It's not like the way, not the solution, but that's definitely something that really helps.
Yep.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let me pass to the other one. If you had a chance, what would you change in the Scrum framework itself? It's a hard question.
That's a trick question.
To the PSTs, yeah.
So this is one of the questions they usually ask PSTs that are trying to become PSTs. Like, if there's one thing you change, and if anything you say is the wrong answer. No. You want me to do this one, Barry, or do you want to do this?
No, you can. I've got an idea in mind, but let's see if you can. You have a different one. So.
Well, for me, the Scrum guide should make more clear that the customers, the users, are the reason why you're doing all this. And it already talked about stakeholders, but stakeholders, and that's also something we struggled with while writing the book. Stakeholders is just really abstract. It's very easy to call your internal product manager a stakeholder, even though that product manager never talks to customers, never talks to users. I've had an example of someone like that I worked with. You have, as a Scrum team, you have to work with users, with people that are actually paying for your product or have a stake in your product in some shape or form. And I think that should be more clearly emphasized in the Scrum Guide, because it's not even in the Scrum framework image right now. There's no customer in the Scrum framework picture. And I find that interesting. And you, Barry, what would you change?
Maybe emphasize the importance of sprint goals even more. And I'm not saying add the word sprint goals even more into the Scrum Guide, because it's already in there 27 times. Yes, we have counted it. But more emphasize it in a way that without a sprint goal, moving forward with Scrum doesn't really make a lot of sense. Because the Scrum events will sort of like be these zombie Scrum events in which everyone is just going to give status updates and yeah, the sprint, the goal of the sprint will probably only be finish the sprint backlog, and then everyone is moving forward like a bunch of zombies pulling work from the backlog and try to finish it, but they don't really have a clue about, so what are we trying to achieve with this? And so the sprint goal is definitely, of course, mentioned a lot in the Scrum Guide, but I would even emphasize it even stronger. Like, it's just, without it, it's just not, it doesn't really make sense doing Scrum. Sprint goal is just a mandatory part of Scrum. Yeah. Not for the sake of that it's mandatory, but it's just, it doesn't make sense to do Scrum if you don't have a goal.
Well, it doesn't make sense to build on that. It doesn't make sense to do Scrum when you don't know what's valuable in your sprint. And the sprint goal is one way to capture why is this sprint important? What are we actually going to deliver of value to our users, stakeholders, customers? So they actually go together. And that's why the sprint goal is so important.
Yeah, and maybe just to change my wording, you can always do a Scrum without having a goal. But once you discover that you don't have a goal and it gets you into trouble, you should definitely not accept it as a fact. So then you can continue using Scrum, but you should change it in such a way and work with your product owner in your organization in such a way that you have a compelling goal that really emphasizes what's valuable for your team as well. But it's a good question.
Thanks to the asker then. Let's continue. So it's about the shareholders, stakeholders, or with the sprint goal. So do you have any expectations about any updates of the Scrum guides in this year or in new phases? What do you think?
That's a dangerous question, but I think I'm not sure. But
so we have PhDs in here, like you, Tolga, and Ahmet. But what I see right now, so you can just give us some hints, maybe.
I don't know, yes. Chris, is it like there's going to be a new version of the Scrum Guide, but I'm not sure. Is there something already published publicly, or maybe, I'm not sure.
Well, I think there was an announcement, but they postponed it because of COVID. Yes. And there is a new version coming up, but there was a lot of feedback from the internal community, like the PhDs and the stewards and people from Scrum Alliance. So they want to basically consider that feedback first before releasing it, but due to COVID, that was all very difficult, was very stressful. So they postponed it, but I don't know if there's a new date announced yet. But there's a new version coming, and I think a lot of the updates in it, the changes that they're making are really good ones. Mm-hmm. But we can't say a lot about what they're changing because it's all very hush-hush. I'd like to say more about that, but that's... Good, yeah. Otherwise, I might disappear. I don't know. So I don't know, Barry. Maybe the one thing, the thing about sprint goals, I think they already announced that that's going to be an important change in the Scrum Guide anyway. So that's definitely something that's going to be addressed.
Maybe just that's something that we can mention is that, but because that's just a wider conversation that's going on within Scrum.org and also with Scrum.inc, etc., Scrum Alliance, is that should Scrum open up more to other areas as well?
Yeah.
I think that question is already answered. Yes, Scrum should, and Scrum is opening up. Like you can use Scrum in healthcare, in sales, in marketing, in whatever. But in what way should that be? Should that impact the Scrum Guide? Like, should the Scrum Guide be more agnostic, or should the Scrum Guide be more focused on software development and from that, or product development, and from that point of view explain like, okay, we explain it in this Scrum Guide as product development, but you can also use it for marketing, sales, etc. And that's just an interesting conversation. I have an opinion about it. So my opinion is, to just give my opinion, I think that's the intention, is that I would like that the Scrum Guide really remains having a focus on resolving complex problems, often focused from a product development perspective. Because otherwise the pitfall might be that it becomes that vague that it loses its strength, and then anyone is confused, like, okay, probably we can achieve world peace with Scrum, but how? That's not clear anymore. But it's an interesting conversation that's going on.
It actually ties into the next question. If it can already cover that one, Umut, because it actually can answer that right away from Barry, what Barry also mentioned about this one. The question is, in your book, do you point anything related non-IT, or is it all about software? And for the book, we had a similar discussion. Are we going to write a book about zombie Scrum in any kind of organization working with Scrum, or are we focusing more on software product development? And we made the decision to focus more on product and software development, because otherwise it becomes very abstract what you're talking about. And we really want to keep it specific and precise and give examples that you can connect to. We may end up writing a book about zombie Scrum for non-IT environments, non-software development. That's definitely something we can do. And even for teams that are not working in software development, the book will still offer a lot of useful recipes and things you can do. Maybe some of the parts are a bit more technical and they can skip them. That's possible too.
Okay, thanks a lot. So this was a free question then in between. So let's continue with your favorite debating structure strings. What's your favorite one?
First one to roll, then impromptu, and then troika. No, I'm just joking. This is another, the classic, it depends. I'm going to tweak the question for myself, and I'm going to change it into, do you have any favorite liberating structures? And Chris can always, maybe Chris has a favorite LS string, could be. The funny thing is that there are 33 official liberating structures and dozens of LS in developments that you can try. And each time when Christian and I try a new one, we tell each other, wow, this is the new favorite. So, but structures that I like a lot are critical uncertainties, because that really is about helping people deal with strategy or create strategy based on uncertain and critical scenarios that they might be facing. I like, in a way, a basic one, like appreciative interviews, because that's really about sharing success stories. But also, in a way, but it's a different one. It's not an official one, it's an unofficial one. It's Mad Tea, because Mad Tea, in a way, it's an energizer. But what you do is that you put people into concentric circles, and in very rapid rounds, they have a very short conversation with the person that they are facing. And you can repeat that about 7 or 8 times. So people are having a short conversation with 7 or 8 different persons in a very short time. And it's a very fun way to, on one hand, so it's an energizer, but they do have a very valuable conversation with a lot of different people. So those are just 3 of the liberating structures that I enjoy. And you can string them together, and then you have maybe my favorite string to answer the question.
We got to
Chris?
Sorry, Chris. Please.
I'm sorry?
Just Barry was saying that, Chris, so I just think that you were going to talk. Anyways, I was saying that we got the virus from you in the immersion workshop, the MATD virus, especially. I was able to try it with 90%, and Emin was make a MATD, was really mad, and with 200 people. So it's a pretty nice structure. We love it also too. It's pretty just sparking the ideas in everybody's mind. Sorry, Chris, please go on.
Yeah, Matty is really nice. It's very cool and very powerful, and you can do it with 500 people if you want. That's nice. I totally agree with Barry's selection. one structure that I really are appreciating more and more is it's eco-cycle or panarchy, which is panarchy is like 3 eco-cycles or 5 or 7 or how many you want all into one. It's quite complex. I like complex stuff, and that's also the pitfall, because sometimes you go into the complex stuff and people just don't understand what's happening. So I also want to make a point that, and that's something that Henry Libmanovich always says, one of the founders of Liberating Structures, is sure, panarchy is very nice, but stick with the easy stuff and do that often, because that's very powerful. Like the string that Barry jokingly mentioned is actually a really good one. Like start with impromptu networking to clarify what is a challenge that you have, then do a troika consulting to get help on that question, and then do a 15% solution to identify your next steps. That is such a versatile string. You can use that in any situation. You can add a 1-2 for all if you want to make it a bit, make the challenges go a bit deeper, or if it's a team challenge that you want to cover instead of a personal challenge. But you can pretty much do that in any situation. And in the learning gathering that Barry and I attended earlier last year, Henry and Keith actually facilitated this string without explaining any of the steps. So they just said to the group, now do an impromptu networking, go ahead. And now do a troika consulting, go ahead. And 1-2 for all, go ahead, you know the drill. And it was a bit awkward, but because everyone in the room knew how these structures worked, it worked fine. And that's, I think, the kind of the level of experience that you want to create with liberating structures in groups. And that's why it's so important to stick to the easy ones.
Yep. Thanks, great answer. I have another question, which is not written in here. What's your least favorite liberating structures? Hard question again.
Oh yeah. I think I have.
There must be one, yeah.
No, I think I have a couple actually. One is open space, and an open space is not really a unique liberating structure. Open space was already out there, of course, and it's just curated and collected as a part of the liberating structures collection. In a way, open space can be awesome, but often what we see happening is that open space just become a boring collection of presentations, and one person shows people talking for 50 minutes, and then sort of like the next station is going to start, etc. And then what you've done is then it's not really a liberating structure anymore. Then it's just open discussions, brainstorms, and presentations hidden and wrapped in the liberating structure open space. So open space can be awesome, but what we always encourage is the sessions itself should be facilitated by using liberating structures as well. So if you have a topic, and the topic, for the topic you've got 20 minutes, then do a quick 1-2 for all, or do a quick impromptu networking to just involve everyone as well. Yeah. And Chris, do you have any?
No, this is a great example also because at the Liberating Structures gathering in Seattle, at the start of last year, there were 300 people present. It was a big open space, a 3-day open space. And almost 80% of the sessions were completely unstructured conversations with groups of 30 people just going at it for 30 or 40 minutes. People were completely disengaged in most of those sessions. So even the Liberating Structures community that should be very aware of how group conversations can be disengaging fell into that trap. So that was a big learning, that next time we do this, make sure that each of the open space sessions is also structured with liberating structures. And then it works. That was very fun to see. We all make that mistake.
Okay, thanks a lot. We can pass to the next question, I guess. If there will be no place for zombie Scrum anymore, and everybody knows and how to implement the Scrum already, what's your next plan? You did find the antidote. What are you going to do now?
That's a good one. Yeah, yeah, could be. You already have an idea. I just needed to.
Yeah, I think so. Well, this would be incredibly awesome, of course, if this ever happens, like Scrum is working well everywhere. I think Barry and I are gravitating more towards helping groups overcome challenges in whatever shape or form. So Scrum often is something we talk about because that's something we're also passionate about. But we also like liberating structures in general and helping groups overcome a challenge. For example, how can we help groups navigate conflicts? How can we help them create strategy together? That it can happen in a Scrum environment, and we often use it there, but it can also be in other environments. And I think that's something that Barry and I are doing more and more of these days. So we may at some point decide to do that all the time. And I don't know. So there's always enough to do in that area and a lot of people to work with and a lot of things to learn. So we're not very good at it yet in the conflict navigation. So we have a lot to learn there.
Yeah, I agree. Christian and I continuously try to be aware of not getting stuck in the Scrum bubble too much, because then you can also get a tunnel vision, and then Scrum is the answer to everything, etc. So therefore, we also organize meetups in a way that's fun. That Chris and I host, are the organizer of 2 user groups. One is the Liberating Structures user group in the Netherlands, which is completely not about Scrum. So from that user group, we and also others from that user group organize a lot of meetups that are sometimes related to completely different topics. And we explore those topics by using liberating structures, but they are not related to Scrum. And actually also the other user group is the Liberators Network. Also in that meetup, we sometimes organize meetups that are not related to Scrum as well. I think that's quite important for us to keep an open mind.
And maybe to add one short sentence to that, Barry, is to always do something that you're not good at yet, because that sort of helps you. It's always good to do something that you're a bit self-conscious about and that doesn't feel entirely comfortable yet, because once everything starts feeling comfortable, people start feeling that, I think. So we don't want to fall into that trap.
No.
Thanks a lot. Stay amateur, stay amateur, stay foolish, that you said. In other words, okay, we can pass. Which debating structures do you suggest for the daily Scrum?
I'm actually writing an article about this one right now, but it will be published in a couple of weeks, something like that. But
I can wait for it.
So I think in the article, I think I'm recommending about 10. I think I'm recommending about 10 different liberating structures that you can use during. Yeah, it's a lot. I was like, I'm gonna pick a 2-week sprint, and then for each day, I'm gonna recommend one or multiple liberating structures. But I think you can for sure do the basic ones, and that will already probably improve a lot. Like just do a one-to-for-all, or do a quick impromptu networking, or do a what, so what, now what. In a way, the 3 suggested questions are about what, so what, now what. So the what would be what stood out, what facts do you observe about yesterday. A fact is we did not finish any work. A fact is I heard someone complaining about that releasing is difficult. And then you do a so what does it mean for the work that we need to do today, and then you do a now what. So that's a very structured way of doing a daily Scrum, but you can do it in a way that everyone is continuously involved and it does not become a status update. Do you have any ideas already, Chris, that come to mind?
Not yet. No, I'm eager. I'm looking forward to your blog post, because the daily Scrum, it's such a short time box. You have to be creative how you use liberating structures there. Just impromptu networking could work fine. But I have never tried any liberating structures specifically for the daily Scrum. So I'm curious to the blog post and the experience of the other people in this room.
Well, writing the article, I was like, okay, this makes sense. So I'm hopeful that,
That's good.
That's that it can work.
Okay, thanks a lot. It was a hard question though. Like for planning, for review, for retro, it's easy, but for daily Scrum, yeah, like for 15 minutes time marks, hard to find a one. What do you think if an agile transformation effort trying scale up with large 10, 15 members Scrum teams, what can we imagine? I didn't get this question. Okay. If we are making an agile transformation effort trying to scale up with large teams, 10, 15 member teams, what can we imagine? Did you get it, or can we ask you?
I can
Okay,
clarify. Yes. I'm just trying to ask that the scaling within an organization with large teams means that a lot of communication, right? In the essence, the scaling requires a lot of communication, but what we can imagine if the teams are very large. What do you think?
I've seen some examples of this. I don't know what constitutes large Scrum teams with 10 to 15 people, but how many Scrum teams are we talking about? But in this case, it was like, I think 8, 9. But if you have teams that are already quite large, like 10 to 15 people, you already have a lot of complexity in those teams. And then you're adding even more complexity by having many of these teams. So there's a lot that is going to be difficult, like creating done increments, working with stakeholders. So I think you're going to see a lot of issues, a lot of impediments. And as a Scrum Master, one of the things, or Agile Coach, one of the things you can do, make transparent what's happening because of that scaling. How many dependencies are you running into? How many dependencies are getting in the way of creating a done increment? How many dependencies do you have in general as part of a sprint, like 20, 30, 40? That's I can imagine a lot of impediments, a lot of dependencies.
Yeah. Chris and I always try to stay away from scaling and just help organizations descale. And just the question that we always offer is, how can we simplify the whole situation? How can we simplify the structure that the organization is using? How can we simplify the way teams are set up, etc.? Because scaling up is quite easy. That's not really a problem. Just hire more people and here you've got another team. Scaling down, that's challenging. And that often says that you should focus on scaling down. The easy stuff is most often not really the good stuff, unfortunately.
Thanks a lot. So nail it before you scale it. It's a good one.
Yes, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
So let me pass. We talked about it a little bit. Maybe you would like to add something, or we can pass. What are the remote techniques for coaching zombie teams? Like to add anything on that?
Well, basically, all the most liberating structures can be used really well virtually. The only downside is that you do need some kind of facilitation tool like Zoom, where you can do breakouts. I don't know. I think Microsoft Teams supports something like it. So you really need something like that. But then you can just do a 1-2 for all, or an impromptu networking, or Troika Consulting. Barry and I use those a lot virtually these days, and it needs some practice. But once you know how to do it, it's quite okay. The only thing we've learned is that you don't want to do it too many times with 100 people, because that's quite stressful. But if you're talking about one team, then it's very doable. So using liberating structures is highly recommended here.
Yeah, and also do it in pairs.
Yeah.
What Christian and I often do is that Christian focuses a bit more on doing the technical magic, making sure that works, getting everyone in a breakout room, etc. And then the other person, that's me, can focus a bit more on the explanation and offering the invitations, and etc. If you do, I can't really imagine, especially with larger groups, doing it on my own. I think that would be too stressful.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So Christian was saying that invitation is 90% of the job. Then we're at immersion, so it's the hardest part. You can just cover up with this.
Coming up with a good question is really half the work, more than half the work.
Yeah, and also for this one, it is that preparation is key. I think the duration of the session equals the time that we take for preparation as well. And maybe sometimes the preparation takes even longer than the session itself. preparing the Google presentation slides that we're using, or setting up a mural, or just testing the technical stuff, the technical part, etc. We really take good time for that because it really pays off.
Okay, thanks. Next question. I'm just passing to you. Do we have time? Yes, like this might be our last two questions, if you have time. What's a good liberating structures, microstructure for the review, sprint review itself?
Great question. Is it okay if I take this one, Barry, the first answer? UX fishbowl. If you have users and customers, like actual stakeholders in your sprint review, which you should, then a UX fishbowl really is an excellent way to do this. Put the stakeholders in the middle and let the team listen to the stakeholders talk about what they learned from the sprint review or how they interacted with the features, or even better, let them interact with the software together while the rest of the people are looking. I mean, that's always my favorite part of the sprint review as a developer too, to see how the people are actually working with what I'm creating, what we've created. So UX fishbowl is really a good one to do. But you can also use its variation like a conversation cafe. That's also a good way to gather feedback. Also, what so what now what? Like, what have we noticed? What does it mean? What are the next steps now that we know this? Basically, what so what now what is a structure that structures your entire sprint review. You could even use different liberating structures for the 3 steps of what so what now what. That's just one way to do that.
And I'm just going to save some time, because the advantage of us writing quite a lot of articles is that we can just answer the questions by sharing an article. So I just shared the article, Improving the Sprint Review with Liberating Structures, and it contains a couple of ideas as well. So then we have time for another question.
Okay, there's another question. Being agnostic. What could be the most difficult part of Scrum when trying with the non-IT industries?
Just on top of mind, it could be clarify what a done increment means in your context. Because that's sometimes, right? Yeah, sometimes that becomes a bit vague. And like Christian already explained, the done increment, that's the essential part of the Scrum framework. And if you don't have clarity about, so in our, for example, in our marketing context, what is a done increment? Yeah, then Scrum itself becomes a bit abstract and vague as well. And then maybe the value of doing Scrum is not really clear. Chris, any ideas for that or different?
No, this is it. It's hard to make tangible what you're delivering in. Well, there are areas where you use Scrum where that's very tangible. But for example, I once helped a team that was doing organizational change in a governmental agency. They didn't have anything to do with software development or product development, but they were trying to use Scrum for that. It worked, but it took a lot of work to figure out how do you write down. How do you create a product backlog for a change initiative? What kind of things go on there? How do we gather feedback in the sprint review? That was a really interesting experience. So that's a difficult part of Scrum, but also the fun part of it, because you have to learn how do you apply those principles of the Scrum framework to another domain. And I think that's where you really learn a lot about what the purpose of Scrum actually is. Okay, thanks a lot for the answers. So we have come up to our limit to the time box. Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll be just continuing this workshops every week, every Tuesday, this time. If you'd like to join us again anytime, you're more than welcome. As participators or as talkers. Yeah, I guess it will be fun. We'll be trying to make it fun. Let's see. That's all. Thanks a lot
for inviting us.
And for hosting this for free for all these people. That's amazing that you're doing this. Yeah.
Cool. So what's the idea? Do we need to wave and then leave the meeting? Or do we
I have no idea.
We will wait for everyone to leave, then we will leave. Okay? That's the rule. This is a liberating structure.
This is the most difficult part. Nobody wants to leave, but remember that we are all hungry
Yeah.
in Turkey.
Yeah. Okay. All right,
Okay,
guys.
thanks,
See you later.
Chris
I'm
and
leaving.
Barry. Yeah,
Thanks,
see you
Bye-bye.
later,
Thank you
guys.
all for
Thanks a lot
being
for
here. It
joining
was
us.
a pleasure.
Thank you very
Thanks
Thank
much.
you
again.
very much. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.